share my screen here to get started. So thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here talking to all of you. So just a little bit about who I am. For those of, I know there are a couple of people on that know who I am already, but for the majority of you that don't have any idea who I am, I am an accountant and IT management person by education. So I have an undergrad in accounting and an MBA in IT. I've been doing knowledge management since 1999 and been self-employed as an independent consultant since 2008 and 2003. So I got started in knowledge management at Hewlett-Packard, where I was at HP for 7 years, 4 of them doing knowledge management. And I am Canadian, but based in Berlin, hence the last lack of German accent. And to get started with, we are going to do a little guided meditation to get us focused on what we're doing here for the next hour. So I think everybody was in their home office. I didn't notice anyone driving or doing anything like that. So, but get comfortable, take a slow, deep breath and close your eyes. Let go of any tension you feel as you sink into the surface you're resting on, becoming still more comfortable and relaxed. Take another slow, deep breath and release your thoughts, letting them drift far away. And now take a third slow, deep breath and know that in this moment, all is well and you are taken care of. Imagine stepping through a doorway into the light, into a beautiful, calm meadow filled with wildflowers. It smells beautiful and fresh. The breeze is gentle and warm on your face. As you try to step further into the meadow to enjoy the peace of the surroundings, you notice a series of strings holding you back, stopping you from taking more than a step or two. They don't hurt, they just gently stop you from moving forward. As you look at them, you realize they aren't that thick, they're quite thin, and they wouldn't be difficult to break free of. As you consider your situation, you notice a pair of scissors in your hand. You cut each string one at a time. As you cut the string, the end that's attached to you dries up and turns to dust, blowing away in the breeze. As you cut each one, you feel a sense of release and freedom. Once the last one is cut, you feel joy at being released. You can now easily move into the meadow and bask in the sun and the peacefulness of your surroundings. Glad to be free of those strings that were holding you back. You breathe deeply and slowly, taking in the scent of the flowers and the warmth and gentleness of the breeze. It will soon be time to bring this journey to a close. But first, take a moment to thank yourself for giving yourself this gift. Bring your awareness gently back to your physical surroundings, back to our virtual room. Take your time, and when you're ready, open your eyes and feel awake, alert, and refreshed. Okay, thank you. Normally I would take a pause here and reflect for a moment and ask people to contribute what their thoughts are. We're a larger group today than I usually do this with. So I'm going to ask you to just write in the chat if you have anything that you would like to share about your experience of that guided meditation. And I'll take a quick look and see what's there once I notice something. But yeah, that's I do this at the beginning of my workshops and my classes, and sometimes in my meetings. It just helps us get centered and leave everything behind, and yeah, get really productive. Everything is so chaotic, and we're jumping from meetings, one after another, back to back, Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. And so I find that taking a couple of minutes really like that and really helps us get focused. So let me just take a look at what people are writing. So relaxed, feeling of being unlimited. Oh, lovely. Thank you. Heavenly, worked well. Thank you. Great. Excellent. It's interesting. Sometimes people haven't meditated or done anything like that before. So it's really been a little bit, on one hand, unnerving for them to do that, but also really positive. So yeah, thank you for sharing your comments. And moving on. So as we all know, the world has changed. It has definitely changed since 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when I started in knowledge management at Hewlett-Packard. In those days, it was about people, process, and technology, and it still is about people, process, and technology. But in those days, it was more about creating repositories and yellow pages of user profiles, and yeah, making things, expecting that there was a sort of a stock and flow, that things were relatively stable, and that's not really the case anymore. The world has become increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA, for those of you familiar with that acronym. It's become more so in the last 2.5+ years with the pandemic, which has been both good and bad, I think. At least from my perspective, there's been good and bad things come out of this, more good than bad. But yeah, it's definitely, for a while there, it's less so now, but get up every day and check, what mask I had to wear and what stores were open and things are sort of settling down, but we're trying to find a new normal, and what hybrid working means, and yeah, how we're going to go forward. So the world has changed and is changing, and things aren't so, there's not the same stocks and flows that we're used to. Employees have changed. We've had the Great Resignation in the US, and to lesser degrees in other countries. I know folks here in Germany who've also been changing jobs, and employees have changed. They want to be more engaged. They want to be purpose driven. They want to take more risks and understand the big picture, and really be seen to be making a contribution and understand what their contribution is. They want to be coached and not managed, and all of these things. So that is definitely changed in the last 20 years. It's changed in the last, well, I'm not going to say how long I have been in the workforce, but if we go back to high school jobs, it's quite a while. So we won't go that far, because I did that math this morning. I went, yeah, no, but it's been a long time. So now in 2020 and beyond, it's about people, process, and technology, certainly. And that part hasn't gone away, but we're dealing with a different environment. We're dealing with VUCA now. So the question is, how do we deal with VUCA? Who can we learn from that might help us? As knowledge management professionals, I hope we're looking for that all the time, of who does it. It doesn't matter, what industry or what sector they come from, who might have an answer for us. And the answer I came up with when I asked that question was artists. And this is based on some work done by a couple of folks here that I know in Germany. Dirk Dobay and Thomas Copeland wrote a book called Creative Company, which I fell in love with before it was even translated into English. It's not that I read the German, but they told me what the German said. And they talked to a bunch of artists and creatives, so theater people, musicians, all kinds of people involved in the arts, and developed this model that you see on the right side of the slide. I'm going to focus on the artistic attitude and artistic practice piece of the equation. And that's what, those are the behaviors that really help us deal with VUCA. You see the challenges just above the part that I've circled, and that's VUCA. So taking an artistic attitude, is about curiosity and passion, having the confidence to try, the resilience to get up when you fail, and not let that stop you. The artistic practice piece is about perceiving and reflecting. So doing that initial sort of scan and reflecting on what you've gathered, playing, so iterating, trying and failing, and performing that for an audience, whether that audience is your boss or your stakeholders in the organization. And then, of course, learning from that and going back to the perception. And so looping around, and that eventually or leads us towards a creativity culture of being elastic, being free, having purpose, and the variety and the flexibility to deal with whatever the situation is in any given case. So this is so I use their model in when I talk about radical KM, and the artistic practice and artistic attitude are key. And mostly what I'm talking about with radical KM is about that space to be creative and analytical. We focus so much on the analytical and being efficient and effective, and the accountant in me and the MBA in me, gets that, very comfortable with that. But what we've taken out is the space to be creative, to ask questions and to iterate and to try and fail. And so radical KM is really about introducing that space into the organization, into our organizations, to allow that and to give us the flexibility to deal with our VUCA world. So creativity is what differentiates us from AI. The technology is great at doing that analytical, logical, process-based piece. So let it do that, and let us focus on what we're good at as human beings, which is creativity. And that's even more true as AI becomes more embedded in our organizations and our activities, and frees us up, I hope, to be more creative and innovative and do things in a different way. So, as I said, radical KM is really about making that space to reflect, to iterate, to experiment, to see what happens, to discover the best way of doing things, to make new connections, using creativity, using different, I talk a lot about arts-based interventions because I have the experience of really having really good experience with those, helping people to look at things differently and challenge assumptions, challenge the status quo, and to really come up with some creative, different ways of solving problems. There's lots of case studies and research, certainly, that backs up my anecdotal experience. What I also found when I started getting into this was that creativity activates the sustainability mindset behaviors, which wasn't something that I was expecting to find, to be quite honest. But someone asked me to speak about the creativity and sustainable mindset to their MBA class. And I said yes, because I always say yes when people ask me to speak. and so I dug into it and I looked at the sustainable mindset behaviors, and I'm like, you know what? These look a lot like the things that we learn when we adopt a creative, artistic mindset and artistic practice. These are the things that artists sort of naturally do as part of their practice. This big picture thinking, being a systems thinker, having a sense of purpose in their art and what they're doing, why they're doing it. They have a long-term orientation. They're very present in their work. All of these things, I'm like, hold on here. Why, when I wrote the first paper, my first radical KM paper almost 2 years ago, I couldn't find anybody else that had made this connection. And yet to me, it was completely obvious. And it was something that we had educated out of ourselves, our creativity. And here we are in 2020, 2022 now, trying to be more sustainable, both in our organizations and products and things that we're doing, but also in our lives, and taking care of ourselves. And we had educated out of ourselves the skills and the abilities that would have made that purposeful or that possible. So yeah, since I wrote the paper, I've come across a book and another paper people that had made the same connection. So, and they were all published within like 6 months of each other. So there were several of us out in the world coming to the same conclusion. So when I found them, I was glad to find other people thinking that way, but glad that I wasn't totally crazy for making this connection. So radical knowledge management is about still people, process, and technology. That has not gone away. It's just not sufficient for the world as it exists now. And we need to put creativity in, and creativity isn't additive, it's multiplicative. And so that's why it's a multiplier there. It's not just being added in, but it's on each of those people, process, and technology. And there's an application for it in lots of different ways. So, and that gives us radical knowledge management. The process person in me put this together just recently, actually, because I kept getting feedback from people about how does this fit in to knowledge management and where should they use it. And so I thought this might be the easiest way to get the message across of how creativity fits in, and arts-based interventions might fit into a knowledge management process. So the first question you've got to ask yourself is, are people involved in the KM process? Yes, no, maybe, I don't know, it depends on what the process is. If the answer is no, okay, go to the end, there's no opportunity. If people are involved, excellent. The next question I have for you is, are relationships important to the process? Trust and respect, are these important things in the process? No, well, go to the end, no creativity for you. If yes, then great. Are the participants creating new knowledge? Excellent. We can add a creative activity, and depending on time and the specifics of the situation, it might be something small, like a 10-minute scribble drawing. It might be a half-day intervention in a studio or online. A lot of this stuff can be done online, but a bigger intervention. So you need to decide, in the context of what you're doing, what the right intervention is, but you have possibility for intervention. If they're not creating new knowledge, are they learning or sharing knowledge? Yes, great, excellent. There's another opportunity for creative activity. No, well, then jump to the end and you're done. And so you can iterate on this and go around as many times as you need to go around. And what changes is the context of the process that you're looking at and the people. But basically if trust and respect and sharing, learning, creating is part of the equation, then there's a possibility to implement or bring in some creative activities. I mentioned this a minute ago about why we need to relearn creativity, but to say a couple more words about it is that with the advent of production lines in the late 1800s, in the late Industrial Revolution, schools began to focus on educating people to go and work in factories. That was the purpose of education. And that's when a lot of the education systems that we're still dealing with, were found their start. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the world has changed and we're not all going to work in factories, attaching one bolt to another nut or some piece of metal to another piece of metal. We're working with knowledge and we're working with papers, and we need to think about things, and that requires different skill set than production line thinking. And so we need to get out of that mindset and relearn our creativity where it wasn't applicable in Henry Ford's Model T production line world. It definitely is a necessity in our knowledge creation, knowledge economy that we're currently living in, 150 years on. Creativity allows us to experiment and come out of our comfort zones. Scary for some, but ultimately a good thing. It gives us a voice and it helps redirect our energy. So there's a lot of personal benefits in tapping into our creativity, which then follow on into our organizations. Because if you've got improved focus, and improved problem solving, this is a good thing for coming up with new solutions, new ways of looking at things, adapting to our VUCA world. So the other aspect of it is to bring our whole authentic self into our work, which I have heard about for the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, about bringing our authentic whole self to work. So putting creativity in the equation helps us do that, and helps give us the confidence to ask the questions and to try out what happens and see what happens. It also gives us the opportunity to develop leadership skills for ourselves and for others. Now, lots of us work for organizations who might be a little risk adverse, who might look at this and go, I don't think so. We're lawyers, or we're accountants, we're serious business people. We have no time for this creativity stuff. We have no time for fun in our workplaces. We're serious, and we need to be serious, and give us a spreadsheet. There's no time for fun and games. And yet fun and games is where innovation comes out of, and where resiliency comes out of. So if your organization is risk adverse, start small. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm going to talk about some different strategies for implementing Radical KM in a minute, but start small. Start with a guided meditation, start with a scribble drawing, start with a little icebreaker that just gets people out of their comfort zones, gives them a bit of fun. I do improv games. I have some improv games that I do in meetings and workshops. So a lot of the stuff that I was used to doing in person, I can do online. We paint. When I do my Radical KM class, we paint. So there's lots of stuff that that we can find a way to do it online. So being remote and being hybrid doesn't need to stop us at all. So start small, start under the radar, do little small guerrilla acts of KM, of creativity, and just see what happens, which is coincidentally how I started out with this in 2011, 2012. One of my first things was I did scribble drawings in workshops, in my requirements analysis workshop. And I was a little nervous the first time, I will say that, standing in front of a room of people, asking them to scribble on a piece of paper. But I had an inkling that this was going to change how the requirements analysis went. And it did. People were more engaged. I got better answers to the questions. The energy shifted in the room. It was a totally positive experience. And I very quickly started doing them at the end of the workshops as well, because it really lifted the energy back up. So we're exhausted after 2 hours of talking about processes and, what would make their lives easier with respect to knowledge management and technology. And so did the same scribble drawings at the end, and it just re-energized everyone to go back to their desks and face the mountain of emails that had accumulated in the 2 hours or 2.5 hours that we were in the workshop. And that, little experience was enough to kind of go, okay, there's definitely a connection here. So Radical KM is something that I've worked on since 2011, and bringing it in to our organizations and the people that I'm working with. So how do we become more creative? This is a short list. There's lots of things that we can do, but playing, arts and crafts, I like the arts stuff, like I say. And it's not that I was particularly artistic as a kid, because I wasn't at all. But I do enjoy it now. And as you can see behind me, I have a studio. I paint as well. So I've had exhibitions here in Berlin and in Toronto before I moved. And that's something I enjoy doing and sharing. So, but exercising, sometimes I'm not in the mood to paint, I go out for a walk, doing improvising when I'm doing a workshop, you know, the little games, just being conscious about what you're doing, being present in the moment, which is one of the things about arts and crafts or photography. Some of those creative activities force you to be focused on the here and now, and stop thinking about everything else that's going on outside of the here and now. And so that really helps your brain process things and crunch away on things that you're maybe trying to solve. And if you're anything like me, often wake up in the morning and go, I have an idea. So, you know, we get so caught up in the, I have to have an answer now. Well, this is not how things work. So we need space. And so some of these things, or all of these things, help facilitate that, giving ourselves some space and making those connections. And I'm not going to read all these points to you about why to implement Radical KM. To me, the most important things are the bottom two, about facilitating sustainable leadership. We need to be present to making better decisions, more sustainable decisions, for our organizations and for ourselves, and being an integrated whole, being that whole person at work, and not being afraid of saying, I'm an artist, I'm an accountant and an artist and an MBA, and I get IT, and you know, you get all of me, you don't just get part of me. So this is good for everyone. So implementation, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay for time. Recalling that knowledge management is about learning, continuous learning, organizational learning. And when we're talking about learning, the roots of how humans learn is by being playful, by being curious, iterating, trying and fail. If you look at kids, I'm sure lots of you on here have kids that were young, and watched them, you know, learn and play, and how they put things together and make connections. And so we need to tap into that ourselves as adults, going back to that curiosity that we had as children. So, and as with any other knowledge management activities, we need to be aware of the organization's culture and the maturity of the organization, and make sure that we're adopting our strategy and our approach to what the organization is ready for. So a minute ago, I was saying that lots of organizations are risk adverse. So take a little thing, take a 5-minute little thing that makes it easy. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Sneak it in around the sides and see what happens, and let it grow, and explore that, you know, support people in doing that in the organization. Put together a little package of icebreakers maybe that they want to use in their meetings. Yeah, so that's my big message in all this. Don't make it harder than it has to be. There are two main paths, for lack of a better word, around implementation: the icebreaker approach, so that small individual team-based approach, and a bigger studio-based approach that takes more resources, is certainly more noticeable. I like the idea of our hybrid offices, you know, and people being able to work at home, and let's renovate and recreate the office space so that it's filled with studio spaces, or at least some of the space that was offices or cubicles, that was desk space, turn it into studios, different kinds of studios, maybe a theater space, an art studio, different, because there are different artistic approaches to be used. So create some different studios for doing this, so that we make the time when we're together in our offices really valuable. Because in as much as a lot of this stuff can be done remotely, there's a lot of extra connection and extra creativity and connection that can happen when we're together in the same space. So why not take advantage of that? And I've talked to a number of organizations lately about, you know, about making some of this old office space that they don't really need anymore into studios, and what that might look like. With both approaches, though, as with knowledge management in general, it requires patience, it requires iteration, or trying and failing, seeing what works, seeing what sticks, what needs to be tweaked a little bit, and lots and lots and lots of communication so that people understand why they're doing it, what this change is all about, why it's good for them, how they can take part, all of that kind of stuff. So with the icebreaker, just to say a bit more about the icebreaker approach, the KM team facilitates small acts of creativity within the organization setting. Maybe they do some training and get some people out in the organization, supporting and doing their own icebreakers within their meetings, put together a little package and support people doing the icebreakers. Encourage people to be more creative on an individual and team basis. So give them the list of things, that they can do at home on the weekends, to tap into and help encourage creativity to develop. All of this stuff isn't stuff that needs to be done in the office. Certainly it can be done at home, on the weekend and the evenings, different places. The main idea of doing the icebreakers in the meetings is to get people out of their comfort zones and thinking differently. Like I was saying at the start, we're going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting, and it gets repetitive and it gets boring and it gets tedious. And so doing the little things to sort of wake people up and get them thinking differently is a good thing. So, and that's the purpose of these little icebreaker activities. With the studio, bigger, more noticeable, you're buying art supplies, you're buying, staffing, creating a room, creating a physical space for this to happen. And so there's more resources required around that, and some good practices that have been developed for doing this. So naming the space and locating it adjacent to the workspace, but not right in the middle of it. Putting it in between, so people have to get away at least a little bit from their desks if they're at the desks. Have some facilitators available, perhaps the KM team, perhaps some other people that are brought in specifically for this purpose, but put some facilitators in place so that they can explain the expected behaviors and guide participants through the activities, answer any questions. When I do the painting, people get really anxious about the painting and that it needs to look like something, but it's not about the painting. It's not about the output. It's about the process. It's about the connections that are made through the process of the painting or the creation, the collaging or whatever it is that we're doing. And it's about the discussion and the reflection that happens around that. So it's absolutely about the process. You don't have to be an artist. This is not about recreating the Mona Lisa in any way, shape, or form. It's just a means to an end. And I see a couple of things in the chat, so I'm going to, yes, I'm just taking a look at this. Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for the comments. You're right, absolutely. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing anything in the chat. Anyway, back to this. So there's a great case study that I came across. It was written up, I think it was published in 2012. It was with the Danish government, and it was the Knowledge and Innovation team, Innovation and Knowledge Sharing Department at the Danish government that have been tasked with improving collaboration between two of the biggest departments, so lawmaking and citizen services. And so there was a lot of silos, a lot of animosity. They didn't work well together. They argued and fought, and it was just not nice. I'm sure some of you will recognize that from your organizations, perhaps. Certainly I have recognized that from organizations I've worked with over my career. So yeah, so the IKS team was tasked with doing something about this problem, because these two teams needed to work together on a regular basis. And so really needed to improve how they work together. So what did they do? They established a studio and spent a year actually preparing the space. So buying art supplies, buying, setting up desks and tables and shelves, and working to develop a process framework for facilitating the interactions, getting the KM team trained so that the KM team could facilitate for these two business units. And the case study says the results were strikingly good. And of course, what happens when something is strikingly good? Word gets out and everybody else wants to get in on this. And so they ran the studio space for 2 years, and users said that they solved problems that could not have been solved any other way. What amazing data to have, right? Great data, great experience, all positive, all good. And so what did they do? They shut it down. There was a reorganization. The IKS department was disbanded. They moved offices, so that shut down the studio and the whole facilitation framework. It all went away. And so this is why people asked me about data and metrics and ROI. And I am always very hesitant about to share my opinion, because people will find a way, organizations will find a way to shut this down even when the data exists. And the data exists for knowledge management, it exists for creative interventions, artistic-based interventions, and it gets shut down because people don't understand it, or it makes them uncomfortable. And so, so much for data-based decision-making. Decision-making is emotional. So tap into the emotions of people, connect with them on that level. Then you can get all the data you want to support that, but connect with them on an emotional level. Anyway, unfortunately, this was shut down, and yeah, that was the end of it, unfortunately. Now we're going to do a quick little activity before we get into the next part with the breakout rooms. So I'm going to ask you to get a piece of paper. Just a piece of scrap paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Get a pen or a pencil or a marker, something to write with, something to make a mark with. I have some markers on my desk. So I'm gonna take one of my markers. I'm gonna take my pink marker because I like my pink marker. Excellent. Oh, excellent. Oops, this is a scrap paper. So I got printing on the other side from something. We're gonna use my scrap paper. Everybody's got their paper and their pencil. You're taking a page out of your notebook. If you don't have a scrap paper around, absolutely, just so long as you have something to make a mark with and something to make a mark on. And we're going to close our eyes.
But before we start, there are 2 questions. If you can answer them. Before we start, and then we can share, of course, the link to the Google Slides that everyone knows, and it's on the chat. Please see Marco and Peter's questions. You want me to tell you what the questions are?
No, I'm just opening. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What kind of problems were solved in the studio, and are there any examples? That was Marco asks, and Peter asks, and what were the pilot results that were so good, even that you don't have the metrics themselves? If you can please share.
Sure. I can actually share the case study that was written up. That it's like 14 or 16 pages long, and I can share that with you. They were things that were really specific to those two teams. They were about implementing changes in government law, and I honestly don't remember the details of them now, but they had solved these. They were about implementing laws that had been passed in Denmark to things like helping people to cross the road, redesigned the crosswalks so that people could cross the road, like visually impaired or people that had some kind of disability, other challenges, was one of the ones that's coming to mind. One of the problems that they solved. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't remember all the details.
Out of the box problem solving.
Absolutely. It wasn't stuff that they were getting any answers to, passing emails back and forth. So I brought them together, and they spent the sessions were typically 5 days long, and so they spent time getting to know each other and communicating and working together. So there was a team building aspect to it. So it broke down a lot of the animosity and a lot of the competitiveness between the two teams, because that was part of the dynamic between the two teams. Each one thought that they were right and the other one was wrong, of course. And so bringing them together in a shared space helped break down some of that conflict. So
okay. I think that answers both questions.
Okay.
So let's go to the breakout rooms. We are listening to the task. Not yet. The task.
Not yet. The activity first.
Activity first.
So everybody's got their pen and their paper, or the marker and paper, and we're going to close our eyes and scribble just for a second. Not long, but just to scribble on the paper. I will hold my scribble up. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. Hopefully you can see that a little bit, what I did. So, and we're going to do 5 more scribbles, or 5 more additions. You can keep your eyes open now for the future additions to your drawing, but this is your drawing. This is the start of your scribble drawing. So take it and rotate it around, see if there's a way that's more pleasing and appealing to you.
Can you show it again to everyone?
Yeah.
So we copy it?
Oh, you don't have to copy it. You make your own. Make your own scribble. Close your eyes and do a scribble. Be brave. Be brave. It's not about copying mine. So rotate it around and make an addition. So make an embellishment, add something to your scribble that you feel improves it. So I'm going to add, I added, I don't know if you can see this or not. I added a couple more lines here anyway, if you can see.
Do you have a thicker marker? Because we hardly see what you're doing.
I'll see if I have a thicker one. But it doesn't really matter what I'm doing.
Okay, so just because people are trying to see what you're doing.
Okay, let me trace over these. But it's more about you making your own marks on your own paper, rather than, I'm just showing you mine so that you know that it's really not looking like anything. So there, I found a black marker. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what mine looks like right now. So that's after 2 rounds. So add a third, we're at the 3rd round, add something else to your drawing, your scribble. I don't know what I'm going to add here. I did some hatching on this end to do some shading. And so that's 3. We'll do a 4th one, add something. And again, you can keep rotating it and see if there's something that, if it speaks to you from a different angle after you've done each embellishment, each addition. I'm up to 2, 3, 4. and last one. Okay. So that's what mine ended up looking like, kind of a bird's head. It doesn't have to look like anything. Sometimes mine look like something, sometimes they don't. So if anybody would like to share hold theirs up to the camera and share theirs. I don't know, Maria, if you want to share yours. They can be hard to see. Oh, yep, excellent, thank you. Anybody else wants to share?
Stuart, take yours higher.
Ah, excellent, thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, and also I see, Alina, we can't see yours. It's not too bright, but who has a duck there? Gerizana, yeah, great duck.
Excellent, thanks. I got to make, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can go to the breakout rooms. You're all primed to come up with oh, I need to give you the question.
It's
so
also on the slides of the breakout room, but please please explain.
Yeah, so just in the breakout rooms, now that you're all primed after having done the scribble drawing, is how would you deal with people who don't understand the value of creativity in radical KM? How would you maybe convince them? What would you do? So this is a change management kind of question, education, communication kind of question. How would you convey the value of creativity and radical KM to your, maybe even just to your KM team? Tell them you've been at this webinar, you came back with this cool idea, this crazy woman in Berlin, and ask them what they think. How would you present it to them? How would you convince them that it was something you should try in your KM team?
Okay, so we have 8 minutes.
Yep.
Let's start. Okay, I'll be moving through rooms to see that there are enough people in each room. And you have the link so you can already tap yourself in and see what people are doing.
Yep.
Of course, I can send you to some rooms if you want specifically, but
no, I'll just look at the slides, so and make a couple of notes what we're doing.
Oh, I see that Jan is alone, so I'll move. No, I'll move him to another room.
A few people that haven't gone into the rooms.
Yeah, I see so. Move him. I'll move people that I see that are alone to a different room.
Okay.
Okay, seems all good. Now, do you see the link?
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a minute, and that,
yes, that will help.
Yeah. Yes, I'm in there. So.
Okay, so now you can play around and see what everyone is doing, like in a studio.
Yeah.
Moving along the people without even getting up from your chair. Room number 1 is empty, so we'll skip it. Not enough people joined, so I moved them to another room. leuk gaat. Alles met het. Should I close the rooms now?
Sure. Yeah, I've made some notes. So.
Okay, 60 minutes notice, and they're all back with us.
Okay, I'll go back to sharing my screen.
Please make yourself silent again. Mute yourself just a minute. Unmute everyone, and please you unmute yourself. Okay, just a minute. Yeah, they're all muted. Thank you, Anat. Okay, here you are.
Great. Thank you. I was looking over your shoulder as you were doing that. I had access into the slides. So lots of groups were saying about just do it, some version on having the experience. And this is absolutely something that the best sales pitch is the experience of doing it, because it's counterintuitive for lots of people. And so the best way to get over that, in my experience, certainly is in giving people the experience, which is why I do these little things in even like an hour-long session, is so that people get a little taste of it. So that was good. There was a couple of groups said about sharing the data and case studies. That's definitely helpful. So because that might get some people over the initial, and get them to try it, and using storytelling, the grassroots, getting in at grassroots was mentioned, and finding a group that might be more receptive, like R&D, where they're big into knowledge creation anyway, so they might be more receptive. So taking an approach much like other knowledge management activities and getting those success stories and sharing them out across the organization, because that does connect in with people on an emotional level, and they say, oh, they're doing it, I have that same problem. Maybe I can give that a try. If somebody else has already done it, I'll be the second to go. I won't be the first, but I'll be the second. So yeah, and gamification was also something that came up in a couple of the rooms. So definitely some good ideas there. So thank you. I hope that you had a good discussion about it in your groups. So we got 2 minutes left. I will just say that there's a partial list, book list on the last slides, and there's 7 books there. I actually have a book list that's, I think it's 36 or 38 books now. So if you want some serious reading that'll keep you busy for the next couple of years, feel free to reach out and I will send you the long list. But this will get you started for sure. So and give you a good taste of what's out there, and the different forms that this can take. So, and lastly, this is my contact information. So if you want to reach out and get in touch, you can radicalkm.com also works. Will take you to my realization of potential page, or find me on LinkedIn, send me a WhatsApp or a message on my phone. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff, so and help you bring it to your organization, because I think it's time for that. And it's time because it's the top of the hour. So I don't know, can we take a minute and do any questions? There's something in the chat.
Okay, I think there are no more questions and people maybe are rushing to the next meeting. Everyone, thank you so much for bringing this new approach, for developing this approach and for bringing it to, and sharing it with us. Everybody, next week we are starting with our new section. We finished the session of engagement. We're starting with the new skills of the new way of the fourth wave workers. So I won't speak about what they are, but creativity, decision, whatever. We are moving to the forward to that place. So good morning, good afternoon, good night. Great KM to all you this week and anytime. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Stephanie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Oh.
I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did. So I'm just trying to read some of the comments in the chat. So
Okay,
actually,
look, so please, you can look at the left hand, at the right hand, you have 3 points. See 3 points near the chat messages on the right corner?
Yeah.
You please press on it.
I can save it.
Yeah, you can save your chat.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be curious to see if you get any feedback from anybody about the session. So.
Oh, I'm always sending feedback form. 2 or 3 may answer, and I'll share it with you so you can see the results.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Of course. Bye. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, Manuel.